The world is louder than ever. Notifications, opinions, chaos, and noise, all demanding your attention. But calm is a decision. And Stoicism, one of the oldest schools of philosophy, teaches exactly that. How to stay unshaken, unbothered, and unbroken, no matter what happens around you. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, didn't just write about calm. They lived it through wars, loss, and uncertainty. They taught that peace doesn't come from the absence of chaos. It comes from mastery of self. In this modern world of constant distraction and anxiety, Stoicism is not old. It's essential. This audiobook will teach you how to apply Stoic principles to modern life. How to detach from what you can't control, act with purpose, and cultivate unshakable peace. Because calm isn't weakness. Calm is strength restrained. Let's explore how to live with stillness, discipline, and wisdom in a world that rewards noise. Chapter 1. The Stoic Foundations. Control what you can, accept what you can't. In every era of human history, chaos has been a constant companion. The world shifts, people change, circumstances evolve, and life rarely obeys our expectations. Yet across centuries, Stoicism has survived because it offers a rare form of clarity, a way to remain still while everything around you moves. At its heart lies a single principle that shapes the entire philosophy. Focus only on what is within your control and learn to accept everything else. This is not a call to passivity, but a call to power. A shift from living at the mercy of events to living rooted in your own discipline. When you truly internalize this foundation, the noise of the world begins to lose its grip on you. The Stoics understood something we often forget. Anxiety is born in the space where our desire to control collides with the reality that we cannot. The human mind is constantly projecting into the future, replaying the past, and imagining hundreds of scenarios that may never occur. We feel tension because we resist what is. We demand that outcomes go our way, that people think as we do, that the world respects our expectations. And yet, the world does not bend to our wishes. This gap between what we want and what reality provides is the birthplace of emotional suffering. The Stoic approach does not eliminate this gap, but it teaches us to navigate it with wisdom, not fear. To understand control the Stoic way is to recognize where your true power begins and ends. You cannot control other people's actions, but you can control your response. You cannot dictate the results of your effort, but you can discipline your intention and your consistency. You cannot control luck, timing, or fate, but you can control your preparation, your habits, and the choices you make every day. Once you draw this line clearly, life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. Clarity is strength. When you stop trying to rearrange the world and start mastering yourself, the storms around you begin to feel less threatening. Accepting what you cannot control is not a resignation. It is an act of emotional maturity. It does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop suffering needlessly. Acceptance frees mental energy. It restores your ability to act effectively instead of react impulsively. Stoic acceptance is like a calm anchor dropped into turbulent waters. It doesn't stop the waves, but it prevents you from drifting aimlessly. Many of the problems that overwhelm us persist, not because they are truly impossible, but because we fight them from a place of frustration rather than clarity. Acceptance gives you back your focus, which is the most powerful tool you have. Action is the Stoic response to uncertainty. Once you identify what is in your control, you move. You take the next step, no matter how small. You work on what you can influence today, rather than waiting for the world to align perfectly. The Stoic does not waste emotional energy demanding guarantees. Instead, they place their faith in discipline, in doing the right thing consistently, regardless of how unpredictable life becomes. There's a quiet confidence that forms when your identity is built around effort, not outcome. When you know that every day you act with intention, you stop being shaken by results you cannot fully govern. The separation of action from outcome is one of the hardest lessons modern life asks us to learn. We are conditioned to tie our worth to results, to promotions, achievements, applause, validation, and visible success. But the Stoic path is different. It teaches you to take pride in the things the world cannot take from you: your integrity, your effort, your mindset, your resilience. When you detach your peace from external events, setbacks lose their ability to define you. Failure becomes a teacher, not an identity. Success becomes a byproduct, not an obsession. And progress becomes inevitable, because consistency thrives when the pressure of outcome is lifted. The world today moves faster than ever, and with it comes constant distraction. News cycles, social media, opinions, crises, everything demands your attention. Yet Stoicism reminds you that attention is your most valuable currency. What you give attention to grows. What you starve withers. Feeding chaos with your attention feeds anxiety. Feeding discipline feeds stability. This is why the Stoic foundations matter now more than ever. In a noisy world, the ability to protect your inner state becomes a superpower. When you master your attention, you master your emotional landscape. At its core, this chapter is an invitation to step out of the whirlpool of stress and return to the simple, grounded truth that peace comes from clarity. You do not need to control everything to remain steady. You do not need perfect circumstances to be calm. You need only to commit to mastering what is yours: your thoughts, your actions, your reactions, your choices. Everything else, you learn to let pass like weather. Temporary, unpredictable, beyond command. The Stoic foundations teach you that life becomes lighter when you stop carrying what isn't yours. It becomes richer when you invest yourself fully into what is. With this clarity, chaos no longer feels hostile. It simply becomes part of the landscape. And you become the one who stands firmly in the middle of it, grounded, aware, ready to act, and unshaken by what you cannot command. This is the beginning of the Stoic journey, the art of staying calm in a chaotic world. Chapter 2. The Power of Perception. In the Stoic worldview, perception is not just a mental process. It is the foundation of human experience. Two people can face the same event and walk away with completely different emotions, reactions, and stories. Why? Because events themselves are neutral. It is the meaning we assign to them that shapes whether we feel calm or distressed, hopeful or defeated, grateful or resentful. The Stoics believed that if you can master the way you interpret the world, you can master the way you feel in the world. This chapter explores that power, the ability to reshape your reality by reshaping the lens through which you see it. Events don't disturb us. Our opinions about them do. This famous Stoic insight is more than a philosophical statement. It is a psychological truth echoed in modern cognitive science. Most of our emotional reactions arise not from what happened, but from the story we tell ourselves about what happened. A delay becomes an irritation because you label it inconvenient. A criticism becomes an insult because you interpret it as an attack. A challenge becomes overwhelming because you assume you're not capable. Change the story, and the entire emotional landscape shifts. When you realize this, you also realize that you have far more influence over your inner world than you ever imagined. The Stoics encourage us to pause before reacting, to create a space between event and emotion. This space is where perception lives. Without this pause, we become victims of impulses dragged around by assumptions and conditioned responses. With it, we gain the power to choose what something means. Instead of instantly framing a situation as harmful, unfair, or threatening, the Stoic mind asks a simple but transformative question: what else could this mean? This question opens the door to alternative interpretations. interpretations that empower rather than weaken you. Perception becomes a tool of resilience when you learn to reinterpret adversity. A setback might mean failure, but it might also mean preparation. A rejection may signal inadequacy, but it could also signal redirection, a path closing so a better one can open. An obstacle might appear as a punishment, yet it could equally be a training ground for strength. Life rarely announces its intentions clearly. The meaning emerges from the perspective you choose. When you shift from seeing challenges as personal attacks to seeing them as opportunities for growth, the emotional weight of life begins to lift. The Stoics were not unrealistic. They did not pretend that everything is pleasant or easy. Instead, they taught that meaning is malleable. The same event can be reframed in ways that protect your peace and strengthen your character. This reframing is not denial. It is wisdom. It is the ability to step back from the first reaction and recognize that your initial perception might be incomplete or distorted. Human beings naturally exaggerate threats, personalize inconveniences, and assume the worst. Stoic perception invites you to question those automatic narratives. One of the most powerful Stoic practices is distinguishing between the facts of a situation and the interpretation layered on top of them. Facts are simple. A project is delayed. A person spoke sharply. A plan fell apart. The interpretation is what creates emotional turmoil. This always happens to me. They don't respect me. Everything is going wrong. When you strip away the unnecessary narrative, the emotional charge weakens. You gain the ability to respond with clarity instead of drowning in assumptions. Perception also shapes the way you see yourself. Many internal battles come from harsh self-judgment. The Stoics remind you that you are not your thoughts. You are the thinker behind them. A mistake does not define you unless you label yourself by it. A fear does not reveal weakness unless you interpret it that way. By changing how you perceive your own imperfections, you unlock the ability to grow without shame. You begin to treat challenges as feedback instead of condemnation. You start to see progress instead of deficiency. Another dimension of the Stoic perception is the reminder that life is broader and more interconnected than your immediate emotions suggest. When something happens, it is only a small piece of a larger unfolding. What feels like misfortune in the moment may reveal itself as necessary in hindsight. The Stoic mind learns to zoom out, to see beyond the moment, beyond the discomfort, beyond the surface. This wider perspective prevents you from being swallowed by temporary difficulties. Ultimately, the power of perception is the power of freedom. You cannot control the external world, but you can control how you understand it. You can choose interpretations that make you stronger, calmer, and more grounded. You can choose to see challenges as teachers, change as transformation, and discomfort as training. When you adopt this mindset, life still throws unexpected situations your way, but they no longer disturb your inner stability with the same force. The Stoic message is clear. Your world is shaped not by what happens, but by how you see what happens. Change the lens, and the experience transforms. Choose your interpretations with discipline, and you reclaim the sovereignty of your inner life. This chapter is an invitation to become the author of your perception, to step out of automatic reactions and step into deliberate meaning-making. In mastering perception, you take one of the most important steps toward mastering yourself. Chapter 3. Train your response, not your environment. Life has a way of reminding us that control is never as complete as we imagine. Just when things seem settled, something shifts, plans collapse, people change, unexpected problems rise to the surface. Many spend their lives trying to shape the world into something predictable, organizing, securing, resisting, and negotiating with every variable they can manage. But the Stoics warn us that this pursuit is a trap. You cannot train the world to behave the way you want. You can only train yourself to respond in a way that keeps you steady regardless of what the world does. The real battlefield is not out there. It is internal. You can't always control circumstances, but you always control reaction. This truth is liberating once you fully grasp it. External events may be chaotic, unfair, or painful, but your response remains your private domain, untouched, ungoverned, and solely yours to command. The Stoics understood that emotional freedom begins when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable and place your focus where your influence is absolute, your choices in the face of difficulty. A person who has mastered their response moves through life with a quiet authority, unaffected by the turbulence around them. Response is freedom. Reactivity is slavery. Reactivity binds you to your impulses, to the whims of circumstance, to the behavior of others. When you react without awareness, you hand over your power. Someone insults you, and your peace is gone. A plan breaks, and your mood collapses. A minor inconvenience spirals into anger because your mind was never trained to pause. Reactivity makes you a puppet, your strings pulled by every frustration and disappointment. But when you learn to govern your response, you cut those strings. You reclaim your autonomy. You begin to act from intention rather than emotion. Training your response is not about suppressing feelings. It is about managing them with maturity. Emotions are natural, but they are not commands. Anger may rise, but you do not have to lash out. Fear may whisper, but you do not have to retreat. Stress may appear, but you do not have to crumble. The Stoic response is grounded in awareness, noticing the emotion, understanding its origin, and choosing a reaction that aligns with wisdom instead of impulse. This ability transforms the emotion from a master into a messenger, a signal you can interpret rather than obey. Every reaction is a test of mastery. Life continually presents small trials, annoyances, delays, disagreements, and these are opportunities to practice. If a long line irritates you, the test is patience. If someone speaks harshly, the test is self-control. If plans change suddenly, the test is adaptability. If you make a mistake, the test is self-compassion. These tests are training grounds. They shape your emotional strength the way resistance shapes muscle. To the Stoic, difficulty is not an interruption of life. Difficulty is the training of life. There is power in creating a pause before responding. A moment of breath becomes the difference between escalation and stability. That pause is a doorway to clarity. It allows you to examine the story your mind is telling. Is this worth losing my peace over? Is this reaction aligned with the person I want to be? Will this matter in a day, a month, a year? When you ask these questions, you elevate yourself above the moment. You respond from a place of intention rather than instinct. That is the essence of Stoic mastery. Training your response also requires accepting that not everything deserves one. Sometimes the most powerful response is silence. Sometimes it is walking away. Sometimes it is choosing not to internalize someone else's chaos. Not every battle needs your energy. Not every conflict needs your voice. Your response becomes stronger when it is selective, when you choose deliberately where to invest your emotional resources. There will always be people who act without thought, circumstances that emerge without warning, and events that unfold beyond your influence. You cannot prepare the world to be gentle, but you can prepare yourself to remain steady. This preparation is built through daily practice, small acts of restraint, reflection, and conscious choice. Over time, you begin to notice the shift. What once triggered you no longer disturbs you in the same way. You stop falling into emotional traps. You stop living in reaction. You start living in command. When your inner world becomes disciplined, the outer world loses its ability to shake you. This is the paradox of Stoic strength. The less you depend on external stability, the more stable your life becomes. You stop expecting perfection from people and permanence from plans. You learn to navigate uncertainty with composure. You become in essence, self-sufficient, not emotionally isolated, but emotionally sovereign. The goal is not to feel less, but to react better. The world remains unpredictable, but your inner state becomes predictable, calm, intentional, and grounded. And in that state, you discover a profound truth. The quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, but by how you choose to respond to it. Chapter 4. The Art of Detachment. Detachment, in the Stoic sense, is one of the most misunderstood ideas in philosophy. Many assume that to detach is to stop caring, to feel nothing, or to withdraw from the world. But Stoicism offers a different definition, one that is far more practical, humane, and empowering. Detachment is not indifference, it's balance. It is the ability to engage fully with life, while refusing to let external events dictate the state of your inner world. It is caring without clinging, participating without drowning, feeling without being ruled by feeling. In this chapter, we explore this delicate art, not as an escape from life, but as a way to stay centered within it. Emotions are natural. They rise, move through the mind, and fade like weather passing through the sky. But problems arise when emotions take command, when anger becomes the decision maker, when fear sets the limits of your actions, when sadness shapes your identity, when desire blinds your judgment. That is when chaos takes root. Stoic detachment asks you to observe emotion without letting it command you. You acknowledge what you feel, but you refuse to surrender your clarity. The emotion is present, but it does not pilot the ship. This ability to observe from a slight distance is where emotional strength begins. Picture stepping back from the moment, as though you are watching your own thoughts and reactions from a higher vantage point. You're still involved, you are not numb, but you see the entire landscape instead of being trapped inside it. This perspective creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, you find calm, not because the situation changed, but because your position within it did. Calm comes from distance, not denial. The Stoics believed that detachment sharpens perception. When you are too close to your emotions, everything appears distorted. A small setback feels catastrophic. A simple comment feels like an attack. A temporary difficulty feels permanent. But when you step back, the distortion fades. You begin to see events as they are, not as your fear, anger, or insecurity amplifies them to be. This clarity allows you to choose responses aligned with wisdom rather than impulse. Detachment also protects you from the emotional extremes that come from overattachment, the desperate need for approval, the fear of losing what you love, the anxiety of trying to control outcomes you cannot guarantee. The Stoics never taught that you should avoid love, ambition, or connection. Instead, they taught that you should enjoy everything fully while remembering its impermanence. This perspective allows you to appreciate deeply without becoming dependent. You can give your best without collapsing when things don't go your way. You can love fiercely without letting fear of loss steal the joy of the present moment. One of the most practical tools of detachment is learning to separate your identity from what happens to you. You are not your failures, not your achievements, not the opinions others hold of you. These are events, not definitions. When you detach your sense of self from external outcomes, life becomes lighter. Success becomes a gift, not a requirement. Failure becomes feedback, not shame. Criticism becomes information, not an emotional wound. Praise becomes pleasant, but not addictive. Another form of detachment lies in letting go of the need for immediate resolution. Many emotional storms arise from the desire to fix everything quickly, to force closure, to remove uncertainty at once. But some situations need time. Some clarity grows slowly. Some questions cannot be answered today. Stoic detachment teaches patience, the willingness to let life unfold without demanding instant clarity. When you stop trying to force outcomes, You release unnecessary tension and open space for natural resolution. Detachment does not weaken your connection to life, it strengthens it. When you're no longer tangled in emotional reactivity, you can engage with greater presence, greater compassion, and greater intentionality. You see people for who they are, not through the lens of your expectations. You experience moments fully because you're not gripping them with fear. You approach challenges calmly because you're not overwhelmed by attachment to a specific outcome. This is not withdrawal. It is wisdom in motion. Detachment is a daily practice built through small acts of awareness. Pausing before reacting, questioning your assumptions, allowing space for emotion without being consumed by it. Over time, this practice becomes a way of living. You begin to feel a steady center within you, a place untouched by external turbulence. From that center, you move through the world with a quiet strength. You can love deeply, work passionately, dream boldly, and still remain unshaken when life changes, because your peace is rooted within, not in the shifting conditions around you. The art of detachment is not about distancing yourself from life. It's about positioning yourself so life cannot uproot you. It's about keeping your heart open while keeping your mind steady. It's about embracing everything while clinging to nothing. And in that balance, you discover the calm, clarity, and resilience that define the Stoic path. Chapter 5. The Discipline of Emotion. Emotions are an essential part of being human. They give color to experience, deepen relationships, and help us understand our inner world. Yet, when emotions govern our actions instead of informing them, life becomes chaotic. The Stoics never suggested that we should become emotionless. They understood that feelings will always arise, sometimes softly, sometimes with overwhelming force. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to discipline it, to feel everything, yet act with reason, to listen to the signals within you without allowing them to dictate your behavior. Emotional mastery, in the Stoic sense, is the ability to experience deeply while responding wisely. Feel everything, but act with reason. This is the Stoic approach to emotional intelligence long before the term existed. Anger may flare, fear may surge, sadness may linger, joy may rise. All of this is natural and expected. The Stoic simply refuses to let the storm inside decide the direction of the ship. Emotion is allowed to exist, but it is not allowed to control the steering wheel. Reason remains the guiding force, the anchor that keeps responses aligned with values rather than impulses. Anger, fear, and sadness are messengers, not masters. Each emotion carries information. Anger may signal a boundary crossed. Fear may alert you to potential danger or unfamiliarity. Sadness may reveal loss, longing, or change. The Stoic listens to these messages carefully, without rushing to suppress them or blindly reacting to them. When emotion is treated as a messenger, you gain insight without losing control. You can observe the feeling, understand its origin, and then decide what action, if any, is appropriate. The Stoic doesn't suppress emotion, they regulate it. Suppressing emotion only buries it deeper, where it grows stronger and more distorted. Regulation, by contrast, is conscious engagement. It is the skill of acknowledging what you feel, grounding yourself, and then choosing a response that aligns with your character. This requires awareness. It requires honesty, and it requires practice. Stoic regulation is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the ability to remain rooted while the winds of emotion pass through. One of the Stoic practices for emotional discipline is naming the emotion. When you say, "I am feeling anger," rather than "I am angry," you create separation between self and feeling. You are no longer the emotion. You are the observer of it. This subtle shift creates space for reflection. You move from identification to analysis, from reaction to reason. Naming an emotion is not to weaken it, but to understand it, to prevent it from hijacking your actions. Another key principle is grounding your emotional response in values. If you value patience, anger becomes a test. If you value courage, fear becomes a challenge. If you value compassion, sadness becomes a reminder of connection rather than isolation. When values lead, emotions follow. They no longer drag you in directions you never intended to go. This alignment between feeling and principle is what gives Stoic discipline its strength. The Stoics also taught that many emotional storms begin with faulty judgments, assumptions, exaggerations, or imagined catastrophes. Emotion often intensifies because perception is distorted. A small mistake becomes a disaster in your mind. A brief silence becomes rejection. A minor delay becomes failure. Emotional discipline begins with questioning these judgments. Is this as bad as it feels? Am I seeing the situation clearly? What evidence supports this thought? When you challenge the mind's automatic narrative, emotion softens. Clarity dissolves intensity. At the same time, the Stoics recognize that certain emotions cannot be reasoned away. They must be endured. Grief, heartbreak, and deep sorrow are not intellectual problems to be solved, but human experiences to be lived through. Stoicism does not deny these feelings. It offers stability through them. You allow yourself to feel the weight without letting it break your inner structure. You hold the pain gently, knowing that it will pass, and that your response to it can still be grounded in dignity and wisdom. Emotional discipline also requires removing unnecessary fuel from emotional fire. The Stoics cautioned against replaying painful events, indulging in dramatic internal narratives, or seeking validation for your distress. These habits intensify feelings and prolong emotional turmoil. Instead, the Stoic learns to redirect attention toward constructive action, meaningful tasks, or calming reflection. You cannot always control the emotion that arises, but you can control whether you feed it or let it pass. Over time, emotional discipline becomes a quiet strength. You begin to notice the shift. You still feel deeply, but you no longer feel lost inside your feelings. You still experience emotion, but it no longer blinds you. You face provocation without losing composure. You encounter stress without collapsing. You experience sadness without letting it define your identity. This steadiness is not coldness. It is maturity. Stoic emotional discipline is ultimately the art of living with an open heart and a steady mind. It is the ability to honor your feelings while honoring your principles more. It is the recognition that emotions enrich life, but only reason can guide it. When you understand this balance, when you can feel without being ruled, when you can listen without being led, emotion becomes a powerful ally rather than a dangerous master. This is the discipline of emotion, a path toward inner strength, clarity, and a life guided by wisdom rather than impulse. Chapter 6. Embrace discomfort as training. Modern life teaches us to avoid discomfort at all costs. We gravitate toward ease, security, and convenience. We build routines designed to soften every edge, to eliminate uncertainty, to cushion us from challenge. But the Stoics saw comfort very differently, not as a reward, but as a danger. Comfort weakens, discomfort strengthens. A life spent avoiding difficulty is a life spent avoiding growth. True resilience, true confidence, and true inner power are forged not in comfort, but in the presence of adversity. Discomfort is not your enemy. It is your training ground. Every challenge is resistance training for the soul. Just as the body grows stronger when pushed against resistance, the mind and character grow stronger when confronted with struggle. Each time you endure difficulty without collapsing, your capacity expands. Each time you face fear instead of fleeing it, your courage grows. Each time you persist through frustration, your discipline deepens. Hardship is not something to fear, it is something to use. It is the weight that builds emotional muscle, mental clarity, and an unshakable inner foundation. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not seek hardship out of self-punishment or martyrdom. They sought hardship to prepare for life, not to suffer, but to grow. They practiced voluntary discomfort, walking in the cold, sleeping on hard surfaces, fasting, going without luxuries, not to prove toughness, but to train the mind to remain stable regardless of conditions. When you expose yourself to discomfort intentionally, you teach your mind that comfort is optional and composure is permanent. You become less dependent on external ease and more anchored in internal strength. Discomfort reveals who you truly are. When everything is smooth, patience is easy. When everyone agrees with you, humility is easy. When plans go exactly your way, calm is easy. But when life becomes challenging, when people frustrate you, when plans break, when uncertainty rises, your true habits, fears, and tendencies emerge. Discomfort exposes the raw material you must work on. It shows you where your emotional weak points are, where you lack discipline, where you rely too heavily on routine or approval. Without discomfort, these weaknesses remain hidden. With discomfort, they become opportunities. Facing discomfort also expands your tolerance for life's unpredictability. Many people crumble not because the challenge is unbearable, but because they have never practiced handling difficulty. Their resilience muscles have never been trained. The Stoic, however, becomes familiar with the sensation of struggle. They learn to stand calmly in the presence of pressure. They learn to breathe steadily in the face of uncertainty. When real hardship arrives, illness, loss, rejection, sudden change, they're not shocked by the feeling. They have rehearsed it. They have prepared for it. They can endure it. The Stoic approach to discomfort also teaches adaptability. Obstacles are not interruptions. They are part of the path. When you view challenges as training rather than punishment, you become more flexible. Instead of breaking under pressure, you bend. Instead of panicking when plans shift, you adjust. You learn to respond rather than react, to think clearly in conditions that once overwhelmed you. Discomfort becomes a sharpening tool, refining your ability to navigate complexity with wisdom. There's also a quiet confidence that grows from willingly stepping into discomfort. When you choose to do hard things, whether it's waking early, facing a fear, having a difficult conversation, or pushing through a demanding task, you build trust in yourself. You prove to your mind that you are capable, that you do not need perfect conditions to function, that you can handle pressure. This self-trust becomes an inner shield. You move through the world with a calm strength because you know that no matter what arises, you have trained for it. Yet, embracing discomfort does not mean seeking suffering unnecessarily. Stoicism is practical, not masochistic. The goal is not to chase pain, but to become unafraid of it. To recognize that the moments you resist most often contain the lessons you need most. Discomfort, approached wisely, becomes a teacher, one that shows you how resilient, resourceful, and adaptable you can become. Transforming discomfort into training requires intentional practice. Start small. Sit with an emotion instead of escaping it. Choose a difficult task instead of the easy one. Face a fear instead of postponing it. Push yourself slightly beyond your comfort zone every day. Over time, these small acts accumulate. They strengthen your character in ways that comfort never could. As you build this habit, discomfort begins to lose its intimidation. You no longer see challenges as threats, but as invitations. Invitations to grow, to refine your skills, to build your endurance, to deepen your patience, to strengthen your will. In every moment of difficulty, you ask, what is this training me for? And almost always, the answer is simple: life. To embrace discomfort as training is to accept that growth requires stretching, that strength requires resistance, and that resilience requires practice. You do not run from hardship. You meet it with intention. You face it with courage. You learn from it with humility. And in doing so, you become someone the world cannot easily break. Discomfort is not the enemy, it is the sculptor. And you are the work of art being shaped, refined, and fortified by every challenge you choose to face. Chapter 7. The present moment is your power. Life is often lived everywhere except where it is happening. The mind races toward the future, imagining possibilities, worrying about outcomes, predicting disasters, or craving achievements. Just as easily, it sinks into the past, replaying regrets, reliving old moments, or carrying emotional echoes that no longer serve us. Yet the Stoics reminded us of a simple truth. The future is uncertain. The past is gone. Only now exists. The present moment is all you ever truly possess. It is the only place where choice, action, clarity, and calm can exist. Everything else is imagination. The Stoic mind understands that power leaks away the moment your attention wanders from the present. The more you live in anticipation or memory, the more you drift from the only moment you can influence. When your mind is split between what has been and what might be, the result is anxiety, distraction, and a sense of being overwhelmed. The present moment is steady and contained. The future is vast and unknowable. When you bring your attention back to now, life becomes manageable again. What you must do becomes clear. What matters becomes visible. Stillness begins when your attention stops wandering. To focus fully on the moment you can influence is to reclaim your personal power. The Stoics taught that every action, great or small, happens only in the present. Discipline exists only now. Courage exists only now. Patience, kindness, clarity, self-control, all of them are practiced in this exact moment. Not tomorrow. Tomorrow is only a concept. Now is the only reality. When you commit to mastering the present moment, you commit to mastering your life. The present moment also protects you from unnecessary suffering. Much of our emotional distress does not come from current circumstances, but from imagined futures and remembered wounds. You may be physically safe, yet mentally tormented by what may happen. You may be surrounded by opportunities, yet paralyzed by fear of repeating past mistakes. The Stoic approach is not to deny memory or ignore future planning, but to prevent them from stealing your peace. The key question is this happening now? If the answer is no, then the emotion belongs not to the present, but to perception. With awareness, you learn to return your mind to what is real. Stillness is not the absence of movement or thought. It is the absence of noise within. When your attention remains anchored in the present, the inner noise begins to fade. Decisions become easier. Emotions settle. Your mind gains sharpness. This is why athletes, creators, thinkers, and leaders often describe their best moments as states of flow, a deep presence where thought and action merge seamlessly. Stoicism teaches that such presence is not rare or accidental. It is a discipline. It is cultivated through awareness, intentionality, and practice. One of the most practical Stoic exercises is simply asking, what is within my control right now? This question draws your mind back from the fog of future worries and past narratives. It focuses you on action, not speculation. It reveals the next step, not the entire path. When you return to this question again and again, life becomes less overwhelming. You don't need to solve everything at once. You only need to manage this moment well. And when you manage enough moments well, the future begins to take care of itself. Living in the present moment also strengthens gratitude. When you slow down long enough to see your life clearly, you begin to notice the small details that often go unseen. The breath that keeps you alive, the body that carries you, the opportunities around you, the people who support you, the simple routines that create structure. Gratitude cannot exist in the future or the past. It can only be felt now. When you anchor yourself in the present, gratitude becomes a natural companion, and gratitude itself is a form of calm. The Stoics knew that attention is the gateway to peace. When a mind is scattered, the heart is restless. When a mind is rooted, the heart becomes steady. To focus on the present is to simplify life. Instead of juggling 1,000 worries, you face one moment at a time. Instead of drowning in possibilities, you stand firmly in reality. And from this grounded place, you respond to life with composure rather than confusion. But the present moment is not only a refuge, it is a teacher. It teaches patience when progress feels slow. It teaches acceptance when circumstances don't match your expectations. It teaches humility by showing that control is limited. It teaches resilience by demanding presence, even in discomfort. Each moment, no matter how ordinary, contains an opportunity to practice becoming the person you wish to be. Over time, living in the present becomes a habit, a way of moving through the world with greater intention. You begin to catch yourself drifting into unproductive worry. You begin to interrupt spirals of overthinking. You start returning to the breath, to the task, to the responsibility right in front of you. The noise of life becomes less distracting because you have trained your mind to return home, to now. The present moment is your power because it is the only place where you can live, act, choose, and become. Past and future may shape you, but only the present moment allows you to shape yourself. When you claim this moment, you reclaim your strength. When you honor this moment, you honor your life. And when you learn to live fully in each moment, calm becomes not an accident, but a way of being. Chapter 8. Control your inner language. The stories you tell yourself shape your reality far more than the events themselves. The words you whisper in your mind become the lens through which you interpret the world. They determine whether a challenge feels overwhelming or motivating, whether a setback feels crushing or instructive, whether a moment feels stressful or manageable. How you describe things determines how you experience them. Your inner language is not just commentary, it is creation. Master it, and you master the emotional tone of your life. Most people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to another person. They exaggerate problems, predict worst-case scenarios, belittle their abilities, and magnify their flaws. They turn difficulties into disasters with a single sentence. This is terrible. I can't handle this. This always happens to me. These statements feel small, but they carry immense psychological weight. They turn manageable moments into emotional storms. They transform minor discomfort into suffering. The Stoics understood that the mind listens to its own voice and believes it. To practice Stoicism is to become conscious of your vocabulary. Replace "this is terrible" with "this is training." Replace "I can't" with "I'm learning." Replace "why me" with "why not me." Replace "this is the end" with "this is the beginning of adjustment." Language creates emotion. Master the words you feed your mind. The moment you shift the narrative, your emotional experience begins to change. What once felt threatening becomes a challenge. What once felt unfair becomes an opportunity for resilience. What once felt overwhelming becomes something you are capable of navigating. Inner language is powerful because it shapes perception. When you frame difficulty as catastrophe, your mind treats it as such. Your body reacts with stress, anxiety, and urgency. But if you frame the same difficulty as practice, preparation, or growth, your body relaxes, your mind remains open, and you approach the situation with more composure. The event is the same, the meaning is different, and meaning is everything. The Stoics knew that the mind interprets reality according to the stories you allow it to repeat. Your inner language also reveals your beliefs. Words like always, never, ruined, and hopeless expose a mindset trapped in exaggeration and fear. These words turn temporary issues into permanent identities. The Stoic trains to remove dramatic thinking and replace it with clarity. Instead of saying, everything is going wrong, say, something is going wrong, and I can handle it. Instead of saying, this is impossible, say, this is difficult, and I'm developing the strength to meet it. Instead of saying, I failed, say, I learned what not to repeat. These small shifts refine your perception and calm your emotional responses. Another aspect of Stoic inner language is neutrality. Not every event needs to be labeled as good or bad. Sometimes it simply is. When you remove emotional adjectives from a situation, you remove emotional reactivity. A flat tire is not a disaster. It is a mechanical issue. A rejection is not a humiliation. It is a closed door. A mistake is not a catastrophe. It is an error to learn from. Neutral language allows your mind to see reality without unnecessary emotional coloring. It clears away the dramatic narrative and replaces it with clarity, which is the first step toward effective action. Your inner voice also influences your relationship with yourself. Harsh self-talk leads to insecurity, hesitation, and fear of trying. Compassionate self-talk leads to confidence, courage, and steady growth. Stoics were firm but fair with themselves. They held themselves accountable without cruelty. They encouraged progress without self-punishment. This balance allows you to improve without breaking your own spirit. When you speak to yourself with dignity, you act with dignity. Changing inner language is a daily discipline. It begins with awareness, noticing when your thoughts turn dramatic, pessimistic, or exaggerated. You cannot change a thought you do not notice. Once you catch the pattern, you challenge it. Is this accurate? Is this helpful? Is there a calmer way to describe this? Then you replace the old narrative with a stronger, more grounded one. Over time, this becomes instinctive. Your mind begins to default to clarity instead of chaos. As you train this skill, you begin to experience a profound shift. Life feels lighter. Situations that once triggered you now feel manageable. Stressors that once overwhelmed you now feel neutral. Challenges that once felt personal now feel impersonal, simply part of the human experience. Your emotional landscape stabilizes because the voice shaping it has become wise, patient, and strong. The Stoics understood a simple truth. You live inside your mind more than anywhere else. If that space is filled with harshness, exaggeration, and fear, life will feel harsh, exaggerated, and fearful. But if that space is filled with clarity, discipline, and purposeful language, life will feel more grounded, more manageable, and more peaceful. Master your inner language, and you reclaim the authorship of your experience. You stop letting automatic reactions narrate your life. You begin to speak from strength, not weakness, from intention, not impulse. And in doing so, you shape a mind that remains steady regardless of the chaos outside. Chapter 9. Separate ego from action. Ego is one of the most subtle obstacles on the path to inner peace. It hides behind ambition, disguises itself as confidence, and whispers constantly that you need approval to feel whole. It is the part of you that demands recognition, validation, and applause. But Stoicism teaches a different path, one rooted in purpose rather than pride. Ego demands recognition. Purpose demands integrity. When you separate ego from action, you free yourself from the exhausting need to be seen, admired, or celebrated. The Stoics understood that ego weakens the mind. It turns every effort into a performance, every achievement into a comparison, and every failure into humiliation. When ego controls your actions, you become dependent on the opinions of others. Your mood rises with praise and collapses with criticism. You chase success not for growth, but for validation. But when you act from purpose, with integrity, consistency, and inner direction, your actions stand on their own. They do not require applause to be meaningful. They do not collapse in silence. Act without craving praise or fearing criticism. This is the Stoic way. Praise is pleasant, but it is not nourishment. Criticism may sting, but it is not fatal. Neither should dictate your choices. When your actions are aligned with your values, external opinions lose their power over you. You do what is right because it is right, not because it will be seen. You speak the truth not because it is admired, but because it is necessary. You work hard not for applause, but because excellence is part of your identity. This is freedom. The freedom to live according to your own principles rather than the shifting judgments of others. Ego thrives on comparison. It constantly measures your worth against someone else's success, talent, or attention. But comparison is a trap. It keeps your focus outward when your true growth is inward. The Stoics taught that your only competitor is the person you were yesterday. The only race worth running is the one toward your higher self. When you detach from comparison, your energy returns to where it matters most: your own effort, your own discipline, your own development. To separate ego from action, you must also separate identity from outcome. Ego ties your worth to results. Success means you are valuable. Failure means you are inadequate. Purpose, however, ties your worth to effort. You are defined by your discipline, not by the external scoreboard. You can fail honorably. You can succeed quietly. You can grow steadily without needing to announce it. The Stoic does not shrink from failure nor brag about success. Both are simply outcomes. The true measure is the integrity of the process. Freedom begins when ego ends. Ego is a prison built from self-importance and insecurity. It traps you in constant performance, where your happiness rises and falls with the reactions of others. When you release ego, you release this burden. You become free to act honestly, to learn openly, to improve humbly. You become free from the fear of looking foolish and from the hunger for recognition. This freedom creates an inner stillness that ego can never touch. The Stoics practiced humility not as weakness, but as strength. Humility allows you to accept feedback without defensiveness, to acknowledge mistakes without shame, and to grow without arrogance. It opens the mind to learning and protects the heart from vanity. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. It means placing the mission above the ego, the action above the applause. Separating ego from action also enhances clarity. Ego distorts judgment with pride, jealousy, and insecurity. It pushes you toward actions motivated by image rather than purpose. When ego steps aside, clarity returns. You make choices based on values, wisdom, and long-term vision, not on how they will make you appear. Your decisions become cleaner, your direction becomes clearer, and your life becomes calmer. This separation requires practice. It requires noticing when you act for attention instead of intention, when you defend your pride instead of your principles, when you chase approval instead of authenticity. Each time you catch yourself and correct course, you weaken the ego's grip. Each time you choose purpose over pride, you grow stronger. Over time, your actions begin to flow from integrity, not insecurity. A Stoic life is not a life without achievement. It is a life where achievement is grounded in discipline rather than ego. You still strive, but you strive quietly. You still succeed, but you succeed humbly. You still grow, but you grow inwardly first. And in that inward growth, you find the calm confidence that no external validation can provide. Separate ego from action, and you reclaim your freedom. You begin to act with purity, live with intention, and walk with a steady mind. You no longer perform for the world. You contribute to it. You no longer chase applause. You earn respect through quiet consistency. You no longer fear judgment. You stand anchored in self-awareness. This is the power of living beyond ego, a life guided by purpose, strengthened by humility, and liberated from the need to be anything other than your truest self. Chapter 10. Voluntary Hardship, Building Mental Muscle. Hardship will find you on its own. Life guarantees that. But the Stoics believed in a powerful practice that prepares you for those moments long before they arrive. Voluntary hardship. This is the deliberate choice to face mild discomfort, not out of punishment, but out of preparation. When you occasionally choose challenge on purpose, cold showers, fasting, silence, walking instead of riding, going without luxury, you train the mind to remain steady no matter the circumstances. These moments remind you, you can live with less and still be complete. Strength grows in voluntary simplicity, in a world built around convenience. This practice may seem unnecessary or outdated, but comfort can quietly weaken you. When everything is easy, you grow dependent on ease. When every minor discomfort feels unbearable, resilience fades. By choosing small hardships intentionally, you sharpen your mental edge. You prove to yourself that you are capable of enduring discomfort without panic, frustration, or emotional collapse. And when life inevitably throws real challenges your way, you are not shocked by the feeling. You have trained for it. Voluntary hardship is resistance training for the mind. A cold shower teaches your body to withstand shock without spiraling into distress. Fasting teaches you that hunger is tolerable and discipline is stronger than craving. Silence teaches you to be comfortable with your own thoughts, without constant distraction or noise. Each practice reveals a hidden truth. Discomfort is survivable. And once you understand that, your fear of discomfort begins to fade. The Stoics practiced voluntary hardship not to romanticize suffering, but to detach from the idea that comfort equals safety. They wanted to ensure that their peace did not depend on external conditions. By occasionally living with less, they removed the illusion of need. They learned that happiness is not tied to luxury, pleasure, or convenience, but to inner stability. Once you experience that you remain whole even when conditions are imperfect, anxiety about losing comfort begins to dissolve. Voluntary simplicity also breaks the chains of excess. Modern life encourages constant consumption, more things, more comfort, more stimulation. But the Stoics understood that abundance can become a trap. The more you depend on luxury, the more fragile you become. Voluntary hardship resets your baseline. It reminds you that you can enjoy comfort without needing it, and that life remains full even without constant ease. When you step back from excess, clarity returns. Gratitude increases. What once felt ordinary begins to feel meaningful again. These small challenges also strengthen discipline. When you choose discomfort, you prove to your mind that you are its master, not its servant. You choose action over impulse. You choose intention over convenience. You choose growth over ease. Each act of voluntary hardship reinforces the message, I can do hard things. That message becomes a deep, unshakable belief, one that stays with you when life demands resilience. Voluntary hardship also develops emotional courage. When you intentionally step into something uncomfortable, you confront fear in its smallest form. Over time, this reduces the fear of bigger challenges, difficult conversations, career risks, personal transformation, or moments of uncertainty. The mind becomes familiar with discomfort, and familiarity dissolves fear. What once intimidated you begins to feel manageable. But Stoic voluntary hardship is not about extremes. It is not about harming yourself or proving toughness to others. It is not about suffering for suffering's sake. It is about practicing controlled, meaningful discomfort to build a stronger, steadier inner foundation. It is about the balance between comfort and challenge, enough discomfort to grow, but not so much that it becomes unhealthy or reckless. Small examples of voluntary hardship can be woven naturally into daily life. Take a cold shower when you prefer warm. Go for a walk in the rain or cold. Skip unnecessary pleasures for a day. Sit in silence without reaching for your phone. Wake a little earlier than comfort demands. Practice minimalism in moments of excess. Eat simple food when luxury tempts you. Push yourself through physical resistance. One more step, one more minute. The point is not deprivation. The point is training. Training your tolerance. Training your discipline. Training your mind to remain grounded in the presence of discomfort. Each small act prepares you for the larger challenges life will inevitably bring. Over time, voluntary hardship reshapes your relationship with difficulty. You stop fearing it. You stop avoiding it. You begin to understand that discomfort is not a threat. It is a forge. It shapes strength, clarifies priorities, and reveals who you really are beneath the comfortable layers of modern life. When you choose hardship deliberately, you build a type of mental muscle that cannot be learned from books or speeches. You learn it through experience, through the quiet courage of stepping into discomfort and emerging steady, calm, and capable. This is the power of voluntary hardship. It makes you unbreakable from the inside out. Strength grows in simplicity, and resilience grows in discomfort. When you choose to train your mind through voluntary hardship, you prepare yourself not just to endure life's challenges, but to rise above them with dignity and quiet strength. Chapter 11. Find clarity in silence. Silence is one of the most powerful forms of nourishment for the mind. Yet in the modern world, it has become rare. We surround ourselves with noise, conversations, notifications, entertainment, constant stimulation, often without realizing that the noise isn't just external. It echoes inward. It fills our minds with agitation, distraction, and tension. But the Stoics understood something essential. Silence isn't emptiness. It's space for reflection. It is the ground where clarity grows, where thoughts settle, and where the mind returns to its natural state of calm. Silence is not a void. It is a presence. It allows you to hear the subtle layers of your inner world, your fears, your hopes, your assumptions, your desires, your unresolved thoughts. When life is loud, these signals become muted. They hide beneath the noise until they accumulate into confusion or emotional unrest. But in silence, they surface, not to overwhelm you, but to be understood. Silence reveals what has been ignored. It shows you the truths that busyness tries to bury. The Stoics practiced solitude daily to reset and observe. They did not withdraw from life, nor did they romanticize loneliness. Their solitude was intentional, a ritual of self-alignment. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself in quiet reflection each morning and night. Seneca spent time in stillness to examine his thoughts and reset his intentions. Epictetus encouraged students to detach from the noise of society long enough to understand their own minds. To the Stoics, silence was not an escape from the world. It was preparation for re-entering it with clarity and purpose. In stillness, the mind sees truth more clearly. Imagine a glass of muddy water. Stir it, and it becomes cloudy. But leave it still, and the dirt settles. The water clears on its own. The mind works the same way. When you stop pouring noise into it, when you stop stirring it with stimulation and overthinking, clarity emerges naturally. Patterns become visible. Emotions become understandable. Priorities realign. Silence does not solve problems, but it reveals the real problem. And sometimes that is all you need. Silence is also where you reconnect with your deeper self, the part of you untouched by external chaos. Noise pushes you outward, pulling your attention to other people's opinions, expectations, and emotions. Silence pulls you inward, grounding you in who you are without the world's influence. When you spend time in that place, confidence grows. Self-awareness deepens. You stop being swayed by external noise because you are anchored in internal truth. Yet silence is uncomfortable for many because it forces confrontation with the thoughts we avoid. In noise, distraction is easy. In silence, truth speaks. But this confrontation is not something to fear. It is something to welcome. It is the beginning of emotional maturity. The Stoics knew that avoiding inner discomfort only prolongs it. Silence allows you to sit with yourself long enough to understand what needs attention, what needs release, and what needs transformation. Practicing silence doesn't require leaving society or sitting in meditation for hours. It can begin with simple, intentional moments. A quiet morning before the world wakes. A silent walk without music or distractions. A phone-free hour in the evening. A few minutes of deep breathing between tasks. Sitting still and observing your thoughts without judgment. Writing reflections in a journal. These small acts reconnect you with your inner landscape. They strengthen introspection, sharpen awareness, and reduce emotional noise. Over time, these moments accumulate into a calm, steady inner environment, one that remains peaceful even when the world is loud. Silence also heightens perception. When the mind is quiet, your senses sharpen. You notice details you once missed. The rhythm of your breath, the tension in your body, the subtle emotions beneath the surface, the overlooked beauty in ordinary moments. This deepened awareness makes you more present, more grounded, and more capable of responding wisely. In silence, you also learn the power of thought selection. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every worry deserves energy. Silence teaches you to observe thoughts without being pulled into them. You witness patterns, impulses, and fears, and with that awareness, you gain the power to choose which ones to engage with. This is where emotional freedom begins, in the space between thought and reaction, created by silence. Perhaps the greatest gift of silence is this. It reminds you that you are more than your thoughts. In stillness, you realize that thoughts pass like clouds, but the sky beneath them, your awareness, remains steady. This realization brings a profound sense of peace. You stop identifying with every emotional wave. You start watching instead of drowning. You learn to breathe through discomfort rather than fight it. Silence is not withdrawal from life. It is preparation for it. It is the sharpening of the mind, the strengthening of perspective, and the cleansing of emotional clutter. In silence, you return to yourself, and from that place, you re-enter the world with clarity, stability, and presence. To find clarity in silence is to return to the source of calm. It is to step away from noise long enough to hear your own wisdom. When you practice silence, even for a few moments each day, you cultivate a mind that sees clearly, feels deeply, and responds with intention. And in that clarity, you discover a truth the Stoics knew well. The quietest moments often reveal the loudest wisdom. Chapter 12. Stoic Gratitude. Nothing is owed. Gratitude, in the Stoic worldview, is not a reaction to comfort. It is a way of seeing the world. Most people treat gratitude as something triggered by pleasant events, good news, success, comfort, or gifts. But Stoic gratitude goes much deeper. It is not selective. It is not conditional. The Stoic thanks life for everything, not just comfort. Gratitude becomes a daily discipline, a worldview, a grounding force that turns even difficulty into something meaningful. It is the antidote to entitlement, complaint, and the restless hunger for more. It is a reminder that nothing is owed, and yet much is given. Gratitude turns scarcity into sufficiency. When you expect the world to give you comfort, recognition, or ease, you remain perpetually dissatisfied. Every inconvenience feels unfair. Every delay feels insulting. Every flaw in life feels like a personal betrayal. But when you realize that life owes you nothing, not perfect health, not perfect circumstances, not immunity from challenge, you begin to see everything you do have as a gift. You begin to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. A breath becomes a blessing. A meal becomes abundance. A relationship becomes a treasure. A quiet moment becomes wealth. The moment you stop expecting, you start appreciating. Expectations narrow your vision. Gratitude expands it. When you hold expectations tightly, the world feels constantly inadequate. Even good moments feel smaller because they fall short of what you imagined. Gratitude dissolves this tension. It removes the illusion that life must unfold according to your script. Instead, it teaches you to observe what is present, not what is missing. This shift transforms your emotional landscape. You begin to thrive in simplicity. You begin to find fulfillment in moments that once went unnoticed. Stoic gratitude also builds resilience. When you can be grateful even in hardship, difficulty loses its ability to break you. Gratitude doesn't deny pain. It places pain within a wider context. It reminds you that even in suffering, something remains: strength, endurance, lessons, support from others, or simply the ability to keep going. To the Stoic, gratitude is a way of refusing to let adversity poison the mind. It is the practice of finding meaning even in the hardest situations. It is the ability to say, "This is difficult, but I am still here. I'm still learning. I'm still growing." The Stoics practiced gratitude deliberately. Seneca reminded himself daily of life's fragility so he could appreciate each moment more fully. Marcus Aurelius began many journal entries by thanking the universe for another day, not because it was guaranteed, but because it wasn't. Epictetus taught students to appreciate what they had by imagining life without it. This was not a pessimistic exercise. It was a method to sharpen presence and deepen appreciation. Gratitude, for the Stoics, was not sentimental. It was strengthening. Stoic gratitude also challenges the habit of complaining. Complaints drain energy and darken perspective. They make problems appear bigger than they are and blind you to the blessings surrounding them. Gratitude shifts the conversation from "Why is this happening to me?" to "What can I learn from this?" From I deserve better" to "I am fortunate to have anything at all." This shift is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about refusing to let negativity dominate your worldview. Another powerful dimension of Stoic gratitude is recognizing interdependence. No achievement is purely self-made. Every comfort, opportunity, and attachment in your life is supported by countless unseen contributions. People who worked, created, suffered, and sacrificed long before you arrived. Gratitude humbles the ego. It reminds you that you are part of a larger whole. It encourages kindness, generosity, and empathy because you understand how much of your life is built on the efforts of others. Gratitude also teaches presence. When you acknowledge what you have, you stop chasing what you don't. You experience life directly instead of through desires and comparisons. You stop measuring your worth against what is missing. You start noticing the sunlight in the morning, the quiet moments between tasks, the strength of your body, the clarity of your mind, the warmth of connection, the simple pleasures that make life rich in ways that luxury cannot replicate. Gratitude brings you back to now, and now is where life actually happens. Practicing Stoic gratitude does not require dramatic rituals. It begins with simple mindsets and daily awareness. Notice one thing each day you would miss if it disappeared. Acknowledge moments of difficulty and ask, "What is this teaching me?" Appreciate people explicitly instead of assuming they know. Recognize how much of your life is not guaranteed. Shift your inner language from scarcity to sufficiency. Over time, gratitude becomes less of an exercise and more of your default state. You begin to move through life with a calm appreciation, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer expect perfection. You begin to feel lighter, not because challenges vanish, but because you stop resisting their existence. You begin to feel richer, not because you obtain more, but because you finally see what you already have. Stoic gratitude transforms life by transforming sight. It reveals abundance where others see lack. It finds meaning where others see inconvenience. It uncovers strength where others see difficulty. And most importantly, it roots you in a mindset where nothing is owed, yet everything is appreciated. When you live this way, gratitude becomes more than a feeling. It becomes a way of being, a way that leads to calm, resilience, humility, and a deep sense of fulfillment that cannot be taken away by circumstance. Chapter 13. The Impermanence of All Things. Life moves in cycles, beginnings and endings, rises and falls, arrivals and departures. Nothing in the world stays as it is. People change, emotions shift, situations evolve, and status transforms. The Stoics built much of their philosophy on this fundamental truth. Everything changes: people, emotions, situations, and status. Impermanence is the rule, not the exception. When you resist this truth, suffering grows. When you accept it, clarity and calm emerge. Understanding impermanence is not a reminder of loss, but a reminder of reality, one that frees you from unnecessary attachment and anxiety. Attachment thrives on the illusion of permanence. You cling to what you love as if it will last forever. You cling to routines as if they cannot break. You cling to emotions as if they define you permanently. You cling to people as if they cannot leave. But clinging does not preserve anything. It only amplifies fear. The Stoics recognize that accepting impermanence dissolves attachment and anxiety. When you understand that everything is temporary, you begin to hold life more gently. You begin to appreciate moments instead of gripping them. You begin to love without fear and let go without breaking. Impermanence is not meant to depress you. It is meant to awaken you. It teaches you that nothing is guaranteed, so everything is precious. Moments matter because they never repeat in the same way. People matter because their presence is a gift, not a possession. Opportunities matter because they arrive and pass like seasons. When you embrace this truth deeply, gratitude intensifies. You stop postponing presence. You stop taking anything for granted. You start living fully in the time you have, with the people you have, as the person you are right now. Peace is knowing you can lose something and still remain whole. This is the heart of Stoic resilience. The Stoic does not deny the pain of loss. They simply refuse to let loss dissolve their identity. They understand that while the world around them can shift in unpredictable ways, the inner self, the character they cultivate, the wisdom they practice, the values they live by, remains within their control. This inner foundation becomes a steady place to stand when life changes unexpectedly. It does not remove grief, but it prevents grief from consuming you. Accepting impermanence also liberates you from anxiety about the future. Much of human worry comes from trying to stabilize what cannot be stabilized. Relationships, circumstances, opportunities, emotions. But when you accept that change is natural, fear loses its grip. You begin to trust your ability to adapt rather than the world's ability to remain constant. You gain confidence not from control, but from flexibility. You stop fearing change because you see it as part of the design, not a disturbance. The Stoics often use the metaphor of a traveler. Life is a journey through landscapes that always shift: clear skies, storms, quiet paths, crowded roads. You cannot force the weather to stay the same, nor can you force the journey to go backward. You simply walk forward with presence, observing each moment for what it is. Impermanence becomes easier to accept when you stop demanding that the world match your preferences and instead meet it as it comes. Impermanence also frees you from the illusion of identity built on external things. Many people tie their self-worth to roles, titles, relationships, achievements, appearances. But all of these can change and often do. The Stoic learns to root identity in something deeper: character, integrity, compassion, strength, wisdom. These qualities remain even when circumstances transform. When you build your sense of self on what is internal and resilient, you can face external change without losing your center. Even emotions are subject to impermanence. No feeling lasts forever. Not joy, not sadness, not anger, not fear. Emotions rise, peak, and eventually fade. When you remember this, emotional storms become less intimidating. You stop believing that a moment of pain represents the rest of your life. You stop clinging to joy as if it must be protected. You stop fearing sadness because you understand it is temporary. This understanding creates emotional fluidity, the ability to experience feelings without drowning in them. Impermanence also deepens appreciation for relationships. Knowing that people can leave through distance, conflict, or even death does not diminish love. It intensifies it. You love more fully because you know the moment will not last forever. You forgive more easily because you understand how fragile connection can be. You let go of petty conflicts because you recognize their insignificance compared to the preciousness of time. Impermanence turns love into something sacred, not something owned. Practicing acceptance of impermanence does not mean passive surrender. It means meeting change with clarity instead of shock, with adaptability instead of resistance, with gratitude instead of fear. It means building your inner world so strong that outer change cannot fracture it. It means welcoming life as a series of phases rather than clinging to a single version of how things should be. Ultimately, impermanence is the quiet teacher that reveals the essence of life. Everything is fleeting, and that is what makes everything meaningful. When you embrace this truth, you stop trying to freeze moments. You learn to experience them. You stop fighting change. You learn to flow with it. You stop fearing endings. You begin to understand that endings create space for beginnings. To accept impermanence is to live with full awareness, open appreciation, and deep resilience. It is to understand that you can move through life cycles, gaining, losing, rising, falling, and still remain whole. When you live this way, you finally discover the calm that comes from aligning with the nature of life rather than resisting it. Chapter 14. Memento Mori. Remember you will die. Death is the one truth we all share, yet it is the one truth most people avoid. We distract ourselves, postpone reflection, and live as if time is an infinite resource. But the Stoics embraced mortality not with fear, but with clarity. Memento Mori, remember you will die, was not a dark warning. It was a guiding light. Mortality brings clarity. It shrinks trivial worries. It strips away the illusions of permanence, ego, and entitlement. It reminds you that life is finite, fragile, and impossibly precious. When you hold your mortality close, your priorities sharpen. The things that once consumed you, petty arguments, imagined offenses, superficial desires, endless comparison, begin to fade. They lose their power because you recognize how little they matter in the vast timeline of existence. What remains are the things that truly count: integrity, connection, purpose, presence. Mortality becomes a compass, pointing you again and again toward what is meaningful. Live as if each day were borrowed. That's where urgency and gratitude meet. When you understand that each sunrise is a gift, not a guarantee, you stop wasting time on distractions. You stop postponing the actions you know you must take. You stop living as though life is an endless rehearsal. You begin to speak more honestly. You begin to love more courageously. You begin to chase goals with intention rather than hesitation. Urgency does not mean rushing. It means recognizing the value of each moment and refusing to sleepwalk through your days. Gratitude also deepens when you remember your mortality. The small moments, a shared meal, a quiet evening, a familiar voice, take on a new glow. You notice the warmth in ordinary things. You appreciate what once felt insignificant. You realize that this moment, right now, is part of the limited collection of moments you will ever have. Gratitude becomes not an emotion you feel occasionally, but a way of living fully awake. Death awareness isn't morbid, it's liberating. It frees you from the fear of risk because you understand that risk is inevitable in life. It frees you from the paralysis of perfection because you know that perfect conditions may never come. It frees you from the fear of failure because you see failure as small compared to the regret of never trying. When you remember that your time is limited, you become more courageous, more authentic, and more alive. Memento mori also dissolves ego. It reminds you that no matter how much status you gain, no matter how impressive your achievements, no matter how loudly the world applauds, the same end awaits every person. Death equalizes all. This truth humbles the proud and strengthens the humble. It shifts your focus from seeking recognition to seeking purpose. It changes your standards from wanting to be admired to wanting to contribute. Ego cannot survive in a mind that truly understands mortality. Accepting your mortality also transforms how you handle relationships. Grudges lose their importance. Forgiveness feels easier. Words of appreciation come sooner. When you understand that the people around you are also mortal, that their presence is temporary, you treat them with greater tenderness. You cherish the moments instead of assuming there will always be more. You listen more deeply. You speak more kindly. You love more intentionally. The Stoics believed that contemplating death should not create fear, but perspective. They saw death as part of nature, as natural as breathing, as inevitable as sleep. When you internalize this truth, you no longer run from it. Instead, you let it guide you. You let it sharpen your awareness. You let it motivate your choices. Death becomes a teacher, not an enemy. One that constantly whispers, use your time wisely. Live with depth, live with honesty, live with courage. Memento mori is not about imagining your final moment with dread. It is about seeing this moment, the one you're living right now, with clarity. It is about recognizing that life is happening now, not later. That your chance to become who you wish to be is today. That your chance to love, to grow, to create, to apologize, to begin, to try, to transform, exists only in the present. When you remember you will die, you begin to live in a way that honors the life you have. You stop drifting. You stop delaying. You make choices that align with your highest values. You give your time to what matters, not to what merely distracts. Death awareness is not about darkness. It is about illumination. It shines a light on what deserves your attention. It reveals what is real. It frees you from fear and anchors you in purpose. And in that freedom, you discover the deepest Stoic truth. A person who remembers death is the one who finally learns how to live. Chapter 15, Stoic Leadership. Calm influences all. Leadership is not reserved for titles or positions. It is a quality shown through behavior. In moments of uncertainty, people look to those who remain steady. In moments of conflict, they follow the one who stays clear-headed. The Stoics understood this deeply. True leaders stay steady when others panic. Leadership is not about commanding attention. It is about grounding those around you. When you cultivate calm, you influence without force. Emotional steadiness becomes a silent form of power. Emotional control is contagious. Calm spreads. Human beings naturally mirror the emotional states of those around them. When a leader reacts with frustration, fear, or impulsiveness, that energy ripples through the group. Anxiety multiplies. Confusion deepens. Decisions become clouded. But when a leader remains centered, speaking with clarity, listening with patience, acting with intention, that steadiness sinks the environment. Peace becomes possible even in the midst of chaos. A calm presence doesn't just soothe others, it strengthens them. The Stoic leader leads by example, not volume. Leadership through dominance, intimidation, or theatrics may command attention for a moment, but it does not inspire trust. It does not build unity. It does not endure. The Stoic approach is quieter, but far more powerful. It is leadership through character, through consistency, self-discipline, fairness, and composure. A Stoic leader does not need to shout to be heard. Their actions speak for them. Their integrity earns respect without demand. Stoic leadership begins with self-governance. You cannot guide others if you're controlled by impulses, emotions, or ego. A leader who cannot regulate themselves cannot regulate a team. The Stoics believed that internal mastery was the foundation of external influence. When you control your reactions, your decisions become clearer. When you control your ego, your motives become purer. When you control your fear, your actions become braver. This inner discipline radiates outward, shaping the environment with quiet strength. Clarity is a hallmark of Stoic leadership. When chaos rises, most people become overwhelmed by emotion and confusion. They act quickly, but not wisely. The Stoic leader does the opposite. They pause. They observe. They ask questions. They listen. Instead of reacting to the noise, they cut through it. This clarity comes not from detachment from responsibility, but from detachment from panic. It is the ability to see the situation as it is, not dramatized by fear or ego. Another key trait is fairness. Stoic leaders do not allow personal preferences or emotional biases to influence their decisions. They are guided by principles, justice, reason, patience, and compassion. They treat people consistently. They value truth even when it is uncomfortable. They take responsibility for mistakes and share credit for success. This fairness builds trust, the strongest currency of leadership. Stoic leaders also practice humility. They do not pretend to know everything. They do not view themselves as superior. They remain open to learning, willing to listen, and unafraid to admit when they are wrong. Humility strengthens leadership because it creates connection. People follow a leader who is human, honest, and grounded, not one who hides behind authority or ego. Another aspect of Stoic leadership is emotional availability without emotional volatility. A Stoic leader listens deeply, empathizes sincerely, and understands human concerns, but they do not absorb or amplify chaos. They remain a stabilizing force. They offer reassurance through presence, not promises. They guide people back to reason when emotion blinds them. They are the anchor in the storm, providing direction when others feel lost. Stoic leadership also demands courage, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet courage to make difficult decisions, to hold steady under pressure, to act on principle rather than popularity. The Stoic leader is not driven by the desire to please everyone. They're driven by what is right. This courage inspires respect because people recognize authenticity when they see it. Influence grows naturally from this combination of calm, clarity, fairness, humility, and courage. People follow a Stoic leader not because they must, but because they want to. They feel safer, more grounded, and more capable in their presence. They trust that decisions will be made rationally, not emotionally. They trust that the leader stands for something deeper than personal gain. The Stoic leader also understands that leadership is service. It is not about being exalted. It is about elevating others. A good leader strengthens people. A great leader makes them stronger than they were before. Stoic leaders intentionally cultivate resilience in others, teaching them to think clearly, regulate their emotions, and act with integrity. They lead not just to solve problems, but to shape character. Ultimately, Stoic leadership is about embodying the qualities you wish to see in others. It is about being the calm in a room full of panic, the clarity in a room full of confusion, the reason in a room full of emotion. When you lead this way, you create environments where people can think, grow, and thrive. To lead the Stoic way is to understand that influence is not imposed. It is earned. And it is earned through the quiet, powerful strength of a steady mind and a principled heart. Chapter 16. Control your inputs. Guard your mind. Your mind is the most valuable environment you live in, yet it is often the least protected. In the modern world, information flows constantly. News, opinions, gossip, advertisements, arguments, alerts, distractions. Most people allow this flood to enter unfiltered, unaware of how deeply it shapes their thoughts, emotions, and worldview. But the Stoics understood a vital truth. The modern Stoic filters information like food. What you consume mentally affects your inner state just as clearly as what you consume physically affects your body. Peace requires discipline. Clarity requires boundaries. A calm mind begins with controlled inputs. News, gossip, and negativity drain calm. Limit intake. Not all information is nourishment. Some is poison. Much of what passes for news today is noise, fear-driven, exaggerated, sensational, or designed to keep you hooked, anxious, and outraged. Gossip distracts the mind with trivial stories about other people's lives. Negativity spreads like wildfire, influencing your emotions before you even notice. Every piece of information you absorb has a cost. Some information builds wisdom. Some steals focus. Some refines your perspective. Some corrodes it. The Stoic understands that the mind becomes what it repeatedly consumes. Curate what enters your attention. Peace depends on it. Your attention is a gate, and not everyone, everything, or every idea deserves entry. Just as you would not allow strangers to walk freely into your home, you should not allow harmful or meaningless input to walk freely into your mind. This is not about isolation or ignorance. It is about intentionality. It is about choosing mental nourishment over mental clutter. A curated mind becomes a stable mind. A stable mind becomes a powerful one. Stoicism teaches that attention is your most limited and precious resource. Whatever captures your attention begins to shape your beliefs, emotions, and identity. If you constantly consume fearful stories, fear will color your worldview. If you constantly consume gossip, your mind will become preoccupied with comparison and judgment. If you constantly absorb negativity, pessimism will become instinctive. But if you choose information that inspires growth, books, ideas, meaningful conversations, thoughtful reflection, your mind becomes a place of strength rather than chaos. Filtering inputs begins with awareness. Notice what leaves you drained, agitated, or distracted. Notice what leaves you wiser, calmer, or more focused. The body signals when food is unhealthy. The mind signals too. Anxiety after scrolling, irritation after a conversation, restlessness after watching drama. These are signs your mental diet is contaminated. The Stoic listens to these signs and adjusts accordingly. Reducing harmful input is only part of the equation. The other part is increasing meaningful input. Instead of drowning your mind in noise, feed it with ideas that elevate your thinking. Philosophy, literature, thoughtful discussions, nature, silence, creativity. Choose mentors whose words reflect wisdom. Choose content that expands your understanding rather than shrinking it. Your mind grows in the direction you feed it. The Stoic also practices intentional pauses, stepping away from constant intake to reset the mind. This includes time without screens, walks without headphones, silence in the morning or evening, a limiting social media exposure, letting the mind breathe between tasks. These pauses act as mental detox, clearing out the unnecessary and sharpening focus. Without intentional stillness, the mind becomes overcrowded. And when overcrowded, clarity cannot survive. Guarding your mind also means guarding your emotional boundaries. Not every argument deserves your energy. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every conflict deserves your presence. You choose what defines you by choosing what gets access to you. The Stoic leader, creator, student, or parent all share one practice. They do not allow their inner stability to be dictated by external noise. Another element of Stoic input control is recognizing that the mind is naturally drawn to drama. It is wired to seek information that seems urgent or alarming. But urgency is often manufactured. The Stoic recognizes this bias and deliberately redirects focus toward what is actually important. Not everything loud deserves attention. Not everything urgent is meaningful. The mind must be trained to differentiate signal from noise. Over time, this disciplined approach to information transforms your internal world. You begin to think more clearly. You begin to respond rather than react. You begin to see with greater precision instead of emotional distortion. You begin to notice how many of your past stresses weren't about real problems. They were about the inputs you allowed into your mind. Guarding your mind is not an act of withdrawal. It is an act of self-respect. It is the recognition that your peace, focus, and emotional stability are too valuable to be surrendered to chaos. It is the commitment to protect your inner world from unnecessary disturbance so your outer actions can remain wise and steady. Ultimately, controlling your inputs is an act of liberation. When you decide what enters your attention, you reclaim authorship of your inner life. You stop being shaped unconsciously by the world and start shaping yourself intentionally. And in that intentional shaping, you become the calm presence that cannot be easily shaken, a modern Stoic in a world full of noise. Chapter 17. Acceptance isn't giving up. Acceptance is one of the most misunderstood principles of strength. Many mistake it for passivity, resignation, or surrender, a quiet giving up when life becomes difficult. But the Stoics saw acceptance not as weakness, but as clarity. Acceptance means clarity, seeing things as they are, not as you wish. It is the disciplined willingness to face reality without distortion, denial, or emotional fog. True acceptance sharpens your mind, strengthens your decisions, and clears the path forward. You can't solve what you refuse to see. Denial is comforting in the short term, but destructive in the long term. When you resist reality, whether it's a failing habit, a broken relationship, a financial mistake, or an uncomfortable truth about yourself, you freeze your ability to improve. Resistance keeps you stuck. It keeps problems unexamined and unresolved. Acceptance, on the other hand, opens the door to growth. It allows you to understand what is actually happening rather than what you fear, desire, or imagine. Acceptance is not defeat. It is the beginning of strategic action. The Stoics understood that suffering arises not from events, but from our refusal to accept them. Frustration grows when you expect life to be easier than it is. Anger grows when you believe people should behave differently than they do. Anxiety grows when you cling to outcomes you cannot control. Acceptance cuts through this emotional noise. It brings your mind back to what is real. It grounds you in the present instead of letting you drown in should, could, or if only. Acceptance is step one of intelligent action. You cannot improve a situation you haven't understood. You cannot change a circumstance you refuse to acknowledge. Acceptance doesn't end effort. It directs it. It focuses your energy on what can be influenced instead of wasted on what cannot. It turns reaction into response, confusion into clarity, and helplessness into strategy. Once you accept reality, you can finally choose your next step with intention rather than desperation. One powerful aspect of acceptance is emotional honesty. It means acknowledging your feelings without letting them distort your perception. You may feel disappointment, fear, or anger, And acceptance includes recognizing those emotions without denying or exaggerating them. You face the truth of how you feel and the truth of what is happening. This dual acceptance creates balance. You neither drown in emotion nor suppress it. You simply observe it, understand it, and then act rationally. Acceptance also dissolves illusions. Many people cling to expectations about how life should unfold. Success should be quick, relationships should be easy, people should always be fair, plans should always work. These expectations create unnecessary suffering. Stoic acceptance removes the should and focuses on the is. Life is unpredictable. People are complex. Plans fail. Circumstances shift. When you accept this natural variability, you stop fighting the flow of life and start navigating it wisely. You conserve emotional energy for what truly matters. Acceptance is not passivity, it is preparation. When you accept that a situation is difficult, you prepare for it mentally. When you accept that someone may disappoint you, you respond with clarity instead of shock. When you accept that challenges are part of life, you stop resisting the unavoidable and begin engaging with strength. Preparation is impossible without acceptance, and preparation is what leads to resilience. The Stoics used acceptance as a tool for emotional stability. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to expect obstacles, flaws in people, and the unpredictability of fate. This was not pessimism, it was readiness. By accepting the inevitability of challenge, he reduced the emotional sting of surprise. Acceptance doesn't eliminate difficulty. It simply removes the unnecessary suffering caused by unrealistic expectations. In your personal life, acceptance grants freedom. When you accept that you cannot control every outcome, you stop exhausting yourself with worry. When you accept that you cannot change other people, you stop wasting energy trying to manage their emotions, opinions, or choices. When you accept your past, you stop battling ghosts and begin shaping your future. Acceptance frees the mind from internal conflict. Acceptance also strengthens courage. When you face the truth honestly, you gain the power to confront it. When you stop avoiding what scares you, you step into a position of control. The Stoics believed that courage begins where denial ends. Once you see reality clearly, you make choices that align with wisdom instead of fear. Ultimately, acceptance is the bridge between suffering and action. It does not ask you to approve of what happened, to enjoy it, or to surrender to it. It simply asks you to face it directly, calmly, without distortion. Once you do, you reclaim your power. Acceptance isn't giving up. It is the foundation of change, the beginning of clarity, and the first step toward wise, effective action. It is the moment you stop resisting life and start engaging with it fully. In that engagement, you find strength, peace, and the ability to move forward with purpose. Chapter 18. Live by principle, not by mood. Life becomes unstable when your actions rise and fall with your emotions. Moods shift daily, sometimes hourly. One moment you feel motivated, the next you feel drained. One day you feel confident, the next you feel uncertain. When you let these emotional waves direct your choices, your life becomes reactive and inconsistent. The Stoics understood this deeply. Discipline anchors you when emotion shifts. Principles keep you steady when feelings fluctuate. To live by mood is to be ruled by impulse. You do what feels good in the moment rather than what is right in the long term. You skip responsibilities because motivation dips. You react sharply because irritation spikes. You abandon goals because fear rises. You speak impulsively because anger flares. Mood-driven living creates chaos, unpredictable, unstable, and often filled with regret. But when you live by principle, you create a life directed by intention rather than inner turbulence. The Stoic lives by chosen values, not feelings. Values are steady, feelings are not. Principles do not shift based on weather, traffic, inconvenience, or emotion. They remain constant even when your mood is low, when challenges arise, or when fear whispers in your mind. This creates internal alignment, a sense that your actions reflect your deepest beliefs, not your temporary states. When you honor principle over mood, you step into a level of self-respect that mood alone cannot offer. Principles act like a compass. They guide you when your internal world feels foggy. They remind you how to behave even when you don't feel like behaving well. They shape your responses in moments when emotion tries to take over. A Stoic might not always feel patient, but they act patiently because patience is a principle they've chosen. They may not always feel courageous, but they take courageous steps because courage is a chosen value. They may not always feel disciplined, but they show up anyway because discipline is not a mood, it is an identity. Consistency is the calm of a person who knows their foundation. When you act from principle, your life develops a steady rhythm. You become more predictable to yourself. You stop battling constant inner conflict. You make decisions more easily because you already know the kind of person you want to be. The noise of emotion becomes background static rather than the main driver of your behavior. This consistency creates peace, a deep, grounded assurance that you can rely on yourself. Living by principle also builds integrity. Integrity means your actions match your values. It means you do the right thing when no one is watching, not because you feel like it, but because it aligns with who you choose to be. Integrity becomes a stable source of confidence. When you trust your own consistency, you walk with a different kind of calm, one that doesn't depend on external validation. But living by principle does not mean suppressing emotion. The Stoics didn't reject feelings. They simply refused to be ruled by them. You can feel angry and still choose maturity. You can feel tired and still choose effort. You can feel afraid and still choose courage. Principle does not eliminate emotion. It elevates action above emotion. To live by principle requires daily practice. You identify the values that guide your life: discipline, honesty, patience, kindness, courage, responsibility, humility. Then you commit to them, not only when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. When your mood dips, your principles rise. When your discipline is tested, your values hold you steady. When emotions push you toward reaction, principles pull you toward wisdom. A Stoic creates small rituals to strengthen this consistency. Showing up even when motivation is absent. Pausing before reacting when emotion surges. Repeating daily habits regardless of mood. Returning to core values in stressful situations. Reflecting each evening on whether actions match principles. These rituals form mental muscle, reliable, dependable, and steady. Living by principle also protects you from emotional regret. When you act from feeling alone, you often apologize later. But when your choices come from principle, you stand by them with clarity. You feel a grounded sense of direction, even in uncertainty, because your compass does not change with mood. In a world driven by impulse, mood, and emotional reactivity, a person who acts from principle stands out. They become a source of stability. People trust them, rely on them, and gravitate toward them because consistency is rare and powerful. Their calm is not accidental, it is earned. Their steadiness is not luck, it is practiced. Ultimately, living by principle is choosing your higher self over your temporary self. It is choosing who you want to be over how you feel in the moment. It is choosing long-term integrity over short-term comfort. This is the essence of Stoic discipline, the quiet, unwavering commitment to live in alignment with your deepest values, regardless of mood. When you live this way, your moods no longer steer your life. Your principles do. And in that alignment, you discover a calm that cannot be shaken. Chapter 19. Stoic Compassion. Understand, don't judge. Stoicism is often misunderstood as cold or detached, but at its heart is a deep sense of compassion. Not sentimental pity, but grounded understanding. The Stoics believed that human beings act according to their level of wisdom, awareness, and emotional development. Everyone acts from their level of understanding. This insight transforms how you see people. Instead of reacting with anger, frustration, or judgment, you begin to see behavior as the result of knowledge, conditioning, and internal struggle. Understanding replaces resentment. Compassion replaces criticism. Compassion is calm applied outward, patience with others' chaos. Just as you strive to regulate your own emotions, Stoicism teaches you to remain steady when others cannot regulate theirs. Not because you are superior, but because you recognize that people often act from confusion, insecurity, fear, or ignorance. The person who lashes out may be overwhelmed. The person who disappoints you may be struggling in ways you cannot see. The person who irritates you may simply lack the emotional tools you have worked hard to develop. Compassion is not weakness, it is clarity. When you understand this, your reactions change. Instead of immediately taking offense, you pause. Instead of escalating emotion, you regulate it. Instead of judging, you inquire, why might they be acting this way? What pain or limitation could be driving this behavior? This shift doesn't excuse harmful actions, but explains them. And understanding is the first step toward wise response. Stoic compassion is not passive or permissive. It is measured, balanced, and informed. You can correct without condemning. Stoicism doesn't ask you to ignore mistakes or accept disrespect. It asks you to respond from wisdom rather than ego. You can set boundaries without cruelty. You can offer guidance without anger. You can disagree without hostility. Correction becomes an act of clarity rather than punishment. It becomes a way of elevating the situation rather than deepening conflict. Stoic compassion also teaches you that everyone, including you, is on a path of growth. People evolve at different speeds. Some learn quickly, others learn slowly. Some repeat mistakes because they can't yet see what you see. Some struggle with emotional control because they were never taught how to regulate themselves. When you recognize this, your expectations soften. You stop demanding perfection from imperfect beings. You stop punishing people for being human. This perspective also protects your peace. Judgment creates tension. Anger tightens the mind. Resentment poisons your emotional environment. Compassion dissolves these inner storms. It allows you to engage with patience rather than irritation. It prevents you from internalizing other people's chaos. Compassion is not just a gift to others. It is a shield for yourself. The Stoics emphasize the idea of shared humanity. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that people do wrong not out of malice, but out of ignorance. They see the world differently, fear different things, and carry burdens invisible to others. If you had their experiences, upbringing, and emotional tools, you might act the same way. This humbling truth expands empathy and reduces the urge to judge. It shifts your focus from condemning others to understanding them. Stoic compassion is also practical. Harshness rarely changes people. Anger rarely inspires growth. Judgment rarely deepens connection. But calm, patient guidance can. When you respond with steadiness, people feel safer. They become more open to correction. They trust your intention. Emotional outbursts close minds. Compassion opens them. And compassion does not mean allowing harmful behavior to continue unchecked. It means addressing behavior firmly, but without hatred. It means saying, this is not acceptable, with clarity instead of rage. It means creating boundaries with dignity rather than aggression. Compassion strengthens boundaries because it removes emotional distortion. The boundary becomes about principle, not punishment. Stoic compassion also deepens your own growth. When you treat others with understanding, you reinforce the same values within yourself. You practice patience. You cultivate humility. You refine emotional regulation. Every difficult person becomes an opportunity to practice wisdom. Every conflict becomes a chance to demonstrate clarity. Every misunderstanding becomes a lesson in seeing deeper than the surface. Ultimately, Stoic compassion is the recognition that we are all imperfect beings doing the best we can with the tools we have. Some have better tools, some have fewer. Some are learning, some are lost. Some are wise, some are wounded. When you see people through this lens, you respond not from ego, but from humanity. Compassion is not softness, it is strength. The strength to stay calm when others can't. The strength to understand instead of judge. The strength to guide rather than condemn. It is the outward expression of inner mastery. To practice Stoic compassion is to bring your inner peace into the world. It is to meet others' chaos with clarity, to meet others' fear with patience, and to meet others' anger with steadiness. In doing so, you not only elevate others, you elevate yourself. Chapter 20. The Stoic State of Peace. Peace is not something that arrives suddenly, nor is it something granted by perfect circumstances. It is not a reward life hands you when everything goes your way. Peace isn't an event. It's a state cultivated daily. It is the quiet inner condition you build through choices, habits, perspective, and discipline. The Stoics understood that true peace comes from within, not from the external world. It grows slowly like strength through consistent practice. It deepens as you train your mind, adjust your expectations, and align your actions with wisdom. The Stoic mind remains still amid storms. This does not mean the Stoic avoids challenge or pretends difficulty doesn't exist. It means they refuse to let external chaos dictate internal reality. While others panic, they breathe. While others exaggerate, they see clearly. While others react impulsively, they respond with intention. This stillness is not apathy, it is mastery. It is the ability to hold your center even when life is loud, confusing, or unpredictable. It is the calm that comes from knowing what is within your control and letting go of the rest. Calm is strength practiced over time until it becomes your nature. The Stoics knew that emotional stability doesn't happen by accident. It is trained like a muscle. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen it. Each time you choose understanding over judgment, you strengthen it. Each time you accept reality instead of resisting it, you strengthen it. Every small moment of discipline becomes part of your character. Over months and years, these moments accumulate into a calm that feels natural, instinctive, and unshakable. The Stoic state of peace is rooted in clarity. When you see the world as it is, unpredictable, imperfect, and constantly changing, you stop fighting it. You stop demanding that life deliver only comfort or fairness. You move from resistance to acceptance, a shift that ends much of your self-created suffering. Peace emerges when you align your expectations with the reality of life. Instead of insisting that every event conform to your desires, you adapt and adjust with grace. Peace is also grounded in detachment, not indifference but balance. When you stop clinging to outcomes, people, or circumstances, you stop living in fear of losing them. When you appreciate the present without grasping, you free yourself from anxiety. When you love without attachment and work without obsession over results, your mind becomes lighter. The Stoic understands that nothing external can guarantee inner peace. Only inner alignment can. Another pillar of peace is emotional regulation. Stoics feel everything, but they are not controlled by anything. They recognize anger, but they don't act out of rage. They acknowledge fear, but they do not collapse under it. They feel sadness, but they do not become it. They observe their emotions like waves, rising, peaking, and falling, without letting any one wave define them. This calm observation creates distance between stimulus and reaction, and in that distance, peace grows. The Stoic state of peace also comes from simplicity, simplifying desires, simplifying thoughts, simplifying reactions. Much of modern anxiety arises from complexity. Too many goals, too many comparisons, too many expectations, too many distractions. The Stoic trims the unnecessary. They focus on what matters. They invest in what brings meaning, not noise. Peace naturally emerges when the mind is no longer cluttered. Another guiding force is purpose. When you live with intention, when your actions align with your values, inner conflict decreases. You stop feeling divided. You stop fighting yourself. Peace grows when you act in harmony with your principles, when your behavior reflects the person you want to become. Purpose transforms restlessness into direction, anxiety into clarity, and confusion into focus. The Stoic state of peace is also strengthened by gratitude, not shallow thankfulness, but the deep recognition that life is temporary and precious. Gratitude softens the mind. It dissolves entitlement. It reveals abundance where others see lack. It roots you in the present, the only place peace can exist. When you appreciate what you have instead of craving what you lack, your inner world begins to settle. Over time, peace becomes less of a momentary experience and more of a core identity. You become the calm person others look to. You become the one who steadies the room by simply being present. You become the anchor, not because life is easy, but because you have built a mind that remains unshaken by life's uncertainty. Stoic peace is not passive or fragile. It is active, intentional, and resilient. It is the product of thousands of small choices to breathe instead of react, to understand instead of judge, to accept instead of resist, to act instead of complain. It is the realization that calm is not something you wait for. It is something you cultivate. In the end, the Stoic state of peace is a way of living, a steady inner confidence that no matter what happens, you can meet life with clarity, strength, and unwavering calm. It is the peace of someone who has built their mind into a sanctuary, one that no storm can enter. The world will always be loud. The pace will always be fast. But you now know the storm outside means nothing if you're calm within. Stoicism isn't about suppressing life. It's about mastering it. Control your perception. Guard your energy. Choose your response. That's all life ever demands. You can't control the world, but you can control your mind. You can't predict tomorrow, but you can master this moment. And when you do, chaos loses its power. The calmest person in the room always holds the most influence. Live by this discipline daily. See clearly. Act rightly. Endure calmly. Because in a chaotic world, true strength is not loud. It's still. You are no longer moved by the noise. You are guided by peace. This is the art of modern Stoicism. And it's not just philosophy. It's freedom.